I'll take your advice from the North Koreans' school of councillors. We are up to agenda item. We're going back to agenda item 8, and that is in regard to the council chamber upgrade. You'll see there on item 8 a description of all the issues that were tabled to be resolved, and some of the actions that have been taken. My understanding is that the budget provision of $70,000 has been expended to the tune of something like $30,000 already. So we've got a balance of 40 to resolve a number of issues, and I'm sure there'll be some comment about what that content looks like. I wonder whether we could have a quick summary, a very brief summary of what's been spent and what initiatives are underway currently to get under to the.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this item was brought back to you because the matter was left to lie on the table at the January council meeting. Can I just clarify first that budget provision of $70,000 is for all furniture and fittings for all HBRC offices, not just for the council chamber. So that's our standard capital replacement. But what it says was budgeted to cover any new furniture fittings for all HBRC offices. So council has spent $31,000 of that for the audio-visual upgrade this year, and we have just set out there. We have already budgeted for further upgrades, improvements, changes to the council chamber, and those have been programmed to occur over the next 2 to 3 years. That includes the replacement of the furniture. The wall behind the councillors over there will be repaired and reinstalled. The current microphone system, because we're aware that there are still issues with hearing, especially for members of the public, but the wireless model will be able to help resolve that situation, and then the replacement of the carpet in the foyer and council chamber. So, Mr. Chairman, this paper was really just to close off the matter that had first been discussed in January, just to inform you of what the proposed upgrades are and to advise you that they are included in current budgets.
I wonder whether you could give us an estimate, though, of those foreshadowed expenditures, what that quantum looks like.
I think that was what they were done in the January council paper, and I'm sorry I wasn't. It was an apology for that meeting. I would have to ask our facilities manager to provide that to you. Paul, unless you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the most of these items will be included in the annual plan discussions on the 23rd. Most of the additional items, and they'll be costed, and there'll be an opportunity then for councillors to have a look at those.
If they're already budgeted, why would they be going to the next plan?
No, the 70,000, 40,000 of that's going to audiovisual, and at least 20,000's been spent on other furniture related for this whole building. So nearly all of that 70 is spent and committed, and the council chamber bit is the audiovisual, okay, and maybe a bit of lighting. The additional stuff here, which Stacey's pointed out, is furniture, the wall replacement or repair, microphones, these things, are all going to go into the annual plan 17-18.
I'm confused.
I can understand that, because Paul, they're already budgeted for, and I think what Councillor Curtin was asking for was what are the actual costs of those. So what we can do is provide you with the breakdown of our estimated costs at the workshop.
Councillor Wilson.
So we've spent 27,000 roughly, excluding GST, 43. I am also slightly confused here. Is the 70,000 just an annual budget allocation for new furniture, or is everything depreciated? Is that a depreciation fund, or is it just new money each year just to cover additional expenses
No, it
on
is-
top of a depreciation
It is
fund?
funded out of the depreciation fund. The 70,000 was a high figure. Normally, you will only see in there furniture and fittings for the building, which would be between 25 and 30,000. It's 70,000 for the 16-17 year because of attention to this council chamber. So that's the reason it was high. 17-18 budget will also be high.
So are we talking 4 beer crates and an apple carton out the back, or
Sounds like.
for the councillor room?
Councillor Dick?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the replacement current microphone system to a wireless model to improve ease of use. Does that still require microphones?
Yes, it will. There'll be a little microphone in front of you, but you won't have all these wires here. So the system that we're looking at, but haven't decided on yet because we have to try them out, is one where you can then, the voices of other speakers actually come back through the microphone to you. So it's not only easier for the members of the public, it's also easier for other committee council members sitting around the table to hear.
I mean, the basic problem with these is that people, including me on occasions, don't use them properly.
Yeah.
All right? And will that resolve that?
No, you'll still have to be reminded Or we could zap you. Could we zap you?
The chief executive needs one tied around his neck.
Councillor Belford.
Just continuing on this theme, I have the honor of carrying the views of Ms. June Graham to this session, who would underscore what Councillor Dick has just said. And I was sitting in the back here at the beginning of the meeting just to do my own field check. When people do speak into the mics, you can hear back there. So it's not necessarily the mic's issue, but better ones would be an improvement, I'm sure. But certainly from the point of view of one of our regular visitors, we haven't licked the audio issue yet to the satisfaction of the gallery. And where apparently it's particularly noticeable is then people who try to view the videos. There are major silence gaps in the videos where there's really no audio at all because people aren't using the microphones properly. So we need to overcome that as well.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. I'd just like to say I look forward to the lighting improving because I find it quite dark in here, and without my glasses I can't see much. Also, when you clean out the councillors' area, an area to hang up coats and jackets will be really helpful because we've had 3 years of them just falling on the floor. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. What I don't get out of this particular paper, and I know it was an issue that was raised at the last meeting, was the improvements to the foyer to represent tangata whenua, or represent our wider community. I see nothing in here where that's been priced or a cost has been put in for that. I understand about that the chair has withdrawn his requirement for the councillors' rooms, but that I don't think was part of. I'm still confused because I was quite keen to see something like that proceed.
Yes, Councillor, I think that's a valid point, and what I'm seeing out of this paper is that there's a significant lack of detail around the costings of what is currently proposed, how it sits with budget, and I'm sure there won't be any other requirements for furniture other than around the council table. So we can assume the 70,000 for this council expenditure, I'm sure. I wonder whether we could come back, sorry to leave this on as an ongoing burning issue, but I do think it's important that you come back with quite some degree of specificity around what is proposed and how much it's going to cost without the GST, and also, if we could be quite clear, yes, the advice from Madam Secretary is that we come back with a recommendation to Council next week with that information as part of this paper's recommendation to Council. But also, I think Councillor Bailey's point and the Chair's point around representing, if you like, the cultural diversity, improving that image in this council chamber and its immediate surrounds needs consideration. The critical factor, in my view, is that the Māori Committee and Tangata Whenua ought to be involved in what that looks like, and I wonder whether that could be reflected in the next moves to work out how we might go about that refurbishment and recognition, acknowledgement around the council building and the council chamber itself, with some sort of reference to our own sources for that and potential budget for it. What do you think of that? Is that possible from your perspective?
So from our perspective, we can certainly do a very brief report to attach to any recommendation that comes out of today for the council agenda to be issued tomorrow that highlights those costings. In terms of your latter point, can I suggest that you move a recommendation along the lines of initiate discussions with the Māori Committee on that matter, or seek advice from, or I'm not quite sure what verb or particular action, but something along those lines for that part of it, because we can certainly provide the costings right now for the things that have been set out in paragraph 8, but if you want to sort of get that process running for the remainder and include that in a recommendation as well.
That would certainly resolve whether we needed to add additional budget in the next year's annual plan or not.
Yeah.
Is there any appetite for that mode of course direction, Councillor?
I think taking Councillor Balfour's advice to have the my recording going so that my voice isn't cut out. Can I just say I agree with that, and I think the Māori Committee should be asked. I'm sure they'll be happy to supply. I do agree with the notion that we do need to have something which is more fitting for who we are as a people in this region than what it currently is. If you go to other council buildings, as I've been to many of them across the country, ours is very austere in comparison. I think we are behind on that regard. The other little thing, two comments I'd make, is on all of these questions, we get down to the detail. I inevitably find that we get council or other group committees get right into it, something they enjoy, and we miss discussing the bigger issues. So we're right happy to pick over the details. I'm going to say two things on details and then leave Kate the field on this and say no more. One is, I want to thank Councillor Hewitt for her comment about the lights. When I raised the lights at the last meeting, they were sort of stunned disbelief, and even pointed out to me that not all the lights are on, and that's why we couldn't see. But that wasn't actually the case. The lighting in here is actually really poor. I've been down the other end here, where at the planning committee meeting, where several of our people who've been at the meeting here said they can't read their notes because the light's that bad. It's just a simple thing. We should have decent lighting. That's just it. And the other one is about the air conditioning. I don't care how you fix the problem. I just think there's been a problem in here identified over and over again. The air conditioning in this room does not work properly. And I just want it fixed. I don't care whether it's GST inclusive or exclusive. I just want it fixed. That's all I want. Thank you.
I think the staff are looking for a resolution. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, Chair, I entered this debate with some trepidation because last time I did it, the Dominion got their own picture of the story, and I got demonised, and some people would think that's good, but I personally felt that I lost a battle, but I've got my eyes focused on the war. So I think that's a very good suggestion to go to the Māori Committee. As I said in an email, I think I felt like General Patton charging into Berlin and lost my supply lines last time. So perhaps a more cautious approach and we'll still conquer Berlin. But and I think that's probably right. So I would actually move that the subject get raised at the Maori Committee, and I can talk to the chair, Mike Mohi. And
And you got to put aside all private personal interest.
Peter will read his own writing. Yeah. That's my final comment on the subject. Peter will read his own.
No. Roger.
Yes, just Mr. Chairman, I just think to add to that motion that the co-chair of the Regional Planning Committee should also be consulted on it.
Good suggestion, thanks.
Yes.
Evans.
So I'm happy to move the recommendations with a 2.3 as an addition, which would read, initiates discussions with the Maori Committee and co-chair of the Regional Planning Committee on upgrading the entry area and council chambers to better represent the region and its culture.
I've got a seconder for that recommendation. We'll take Councillor Graham, I think.
Is the Dominion here?
Any debate on that?
Took the pressure off you, Andy.
Any debate on that recommendation? Yes, Mr. Buckley.
Just perhaps the defining the areas may not be the best approach at this point in time. I think you need to have the conversation first, because the feedback that you get back from the Māori committee and the wider Māori community may be of a different approach. Yeah. So yeah, kia ora.
All right, so we've got that recommendation. I think we've generally got the gist of that. Is there any consideration, anyone want to speak to that, consider that? All pretty clear on it. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour?
Aye.
Are those against? Great. Right, so we're up to, we're up to item 10.
Charging it here.
There we go.
Regular.
That's the ACC sale leasehold. Cause of great confusion. Well, this will take 2 hours. Mr. Drury will give us 3 minutes on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting now, welcome to Trudy Kulkoli. She helped put this paper together. This paper is comprehensive. I think it started off just trying to understand the cash flows vis-a-vis the sales of leasehold property under the deal we've got with ACC. Dated back in December 2013, so we have put a lot of information in here. We've given the objectives of why we set up the agreement with ACC back in December 2013. We've given some details of how that agreement works. But the top part of this paper is the diagrams, I think. I mean, we have worked on these diagrams. It was suggested by one of the councillors maybe we should put a diagram up, and indeed we've attempted to do that on page 28. We try to show here that from the lessees through the council down to ACC, the money flows down. The 37.6 million that the council received in December 13, which is currently held on deposit awaiting investment, still is retained in the council, still earning interest, and that's off to the side, and that's the left-hand side of this box. So this table indicates that the rents go down the left-hand side. The rents are paid by the lessees. They come to the regional council who administers this portfolio. The net rent gets paid to ACC. On the right-hand side, those lessees that freehold, there's a sale price which tracks down to ACC. And if the sale price is in excess of the net present value of the remaining cash flows for the remaining 46 years or whatever of the agreement, if the sale price is in excess of that, and generally they are, then the council gets to keep a third of that. So the next table, which is third of the exits, yeah. So on page 28, we've attempted to give you an idea of the money flows. So this shows you the number of lessees when the agreement was done Back in 2013, we had 628 lessees. Now we have only 431. The next column shows those lessees that have taken the opportunity to freehold under the provisions of the Act, and there's 197 of them over that 3 to 4 year period. The sale price received for those freeholdings, the share that has gone to council, and of course the net that has been paid to ACC. So you'll see that the payments to ACC are 18.7 million. I'd like to say it was probably the higher price properties that have sold. Generally the cross leases haven't really moved. The next column I thought was of interest is the minimum rents due to be paid, or minimum rent on which the payments are based to ACC, and you can see the payments that we're obliged to pay ACC have come down considerably, but you'd expect that under the agreement because of course 197 of the properties have been freeholded and the money's been paid back to ACC, so the amount of rents that received from the lessees that go through to ACC is considerably reduced, which you'd expect in an agreement like that. At the end of the 50 years, all this property is handed back to council, reverts back to council, and the rentals all accrue to council. So we not only administer it on behalf of the lessees, but at the end of this agreement with ACC, all the property just reverts back to council and all the payments pertaining to that. Mr. Chairman, I think I'll leave it at that and perhaps take questions, and if that's appropriate.
Councillor Barker has a question.
Thank you for that. I have read the paper very carefully, and I want to draw your attention to page 29. And I want to draw your attention to the range of figures there. And across the bottom in the 5th column, paid to ACC, this is the amount we've paid to ACC, 18,733 times 3, which makes it $18.7 million. I then want you to come down to point 13, and then we have received from ACC 38 million in cash. The issue you haven't shown here is that on the surface of it, we've got 38 million in cash from ACC, and we've paid to them 18.7 million. Now, I'm still struggling to reconcile how this is of benefit to us. Now, I presume the way you've written the report, that there are pluses and minuses in here. We get some, they get some, backwards and forwards, and that the 18.7 million is not a net value. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to give to me a column of figures that show what we have received from ACC net and what we have paid to ACC net. I want to see how I want to be able to compare the end point with the end point. I don't have that here. Is that clear to you? So I can see 18.7 million being paid out. I can see we get 38, and then this is only part way through a multi-year deal.
But Mr. Chairman, the 18.7 is paid out of the 19.055 sale proceeds, is it not?
It is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's quite separate.
Yeah, if we didn't do any freeholdings, it's just the freeholding, and because of the market has actually influenced. If there was no freeholdings, we would only pay the minimum annual rent required, less the administration costs. The 38 million is still sitting there, not touched. When we sell a property, the value that we get in, the leasehold's interest, what we sell it for, ACC are entitled to all that rent over 50 years.
I understand that.
So that money is the money I get from the sale. I work out the net present value over 50 years rent, pay that back out of that money. So the money ACC paid us to start with is still sitting there. And if I didn't sell that place, ACC would only be $2,000 a year of the annual rent for that property.
I get that, but what I'm looking for is the net. What is the net position? Yes, you've got this, so you've got here the 18. So I see the 18,000 paid, but I want to know what was the net position. How much they paid us? Then we just boil all that down. What have they paid to us, and what have we paid to them? Where is that?
Well, Mr Chairman, I'll have another attempt at if we hadn't sold any properties to lessees, we'd have the 38 million and we'd be paying to ACC as per the agreement something in the order of about $2 million for rentals, because of course we'd have a lot more properties, a lot more rentals. So we'd keep our 38 mil, we'd be paying them $2 million in rentals. What we tried to show you here is that 177 have been sold. We have paid them 18.7 million, and that leaves in your way 38 less for them anyway. 38 less the 18, as far as they're concerned. We're still sitting on the 38, but the transaction for them is less valuable. However, because we've paid them all this 18 million back, we only now need to pay them in and around $1 million in rentals. So it does balance. It does balance. We pay them a lot less rentals.
So if I've understood that conversation correctly, this 18.733 million that's been paid to them is not all that's been paid to them, because that's just the stuff that's been freeholded. So
That's
in
correct.
addition to that
That's
18.7, they've also had another 6.
They've also had the rentals coming through.
Which is how much in total over the 3 or 4 years?
We can pull that out for you, and indeed that column was in there, and in my judgment I pulled it out. I thought it was
All
getting
right,
far too complicated.
let's, for the sake of this discussion, let's say it's 4 million.
Okay.
Okay, so on the face of it, this looks like a really bad deal, because if we hadn't sold this future rental, we would have that $23 million ourselves and still own 2/3 of the properties and be getting rents from them.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't have the 38 million. We wouldn't have the 38 million.
No, we wouldn't have the 38, but we'd have 23 plus 2/3 of the rental for the next however many years.
Yes, but we wouldn't have the 38 million, and we wouldn't have the interest that's gained on the 38 million.
But that's what
It's just been sitting
So
in
it's
the
not a
bank and
bad
being
deal.
paid
I
off.
mean, we've got 38 million in the bank, which is giving us interest, and when it goes over to investment, perhaps it'll even given us more than interest. So that's the deal.
Can I, and look, there's one other question that's bothering me here, which is this, I think it's assessed rental based on a 1.5% annual inflation rate, is that correct? Is
Yes,
that the
given to us by our
calculation?
valuers, yeah.
So where does the risk lie if that 1.5, or risk or reward lie, if the 1.5% is not
Achieved.
met, or
Achieved.
more than that is actually generated? Who's the beneficiary, or who loses?
Well,
if that's not the number.
If 1.5 is not the number, which it isn't, it's an estimate given to us by the valuers, the number is substantially in excess of the 1.5. We all know the market's gone quite high. To the extent it's in excess of the 1.5, council gets all that revenue. It doesn't go to ACC. If the land didn't go up by 1.5, then we'd have lost on it. But we had an independent opinion put forward by the valuers, and the 1.5 was considered to be conservative, and it's certainly turned out to be very, very conservative. And this paper actually indicates in number 17, page 29, that the profit share to council, over and above the 38 mil we've got in the bank, we've got $1 million out of this agreement. And that's our profit share for the reason you pointed out, Councillor, which is land values increasing over 1.5, and it's also our profit share on the sales.
Just if I could hold you one moment, Councillor, I just want Councillor Barker to be satisfied.
Well, okay, there's two things about this. I was heading off on the same tack as what Councillor Bevan is, and when I come back to it, I also want to be able to be demonstrated to me that this agreement we've got here is superior to, if not as good as, us holding on to these properties, deriving the rental, and then being able to use them as a bankable way of lending it. So what we've done is forward shifted to get the money, cash of hand. What was so attractive about that it was superior to us continuing to hold them. And I still haven't, that's the first point. The second point is I still haven't got clarity about how we are better off under this proposal. I can't see it.
Councillor Barker, having being involved in that decision at that time, the decision-making was around shifting that resource from its current position into another strategic asset, and on the assumptions that that would be realised, the returns on that investment would be realised in X amount of time. That's been delayed significantly. So the question you're asking is, if you entered a deal back in 2013, how is it now equitable? The deal itself provides for a profit share by this council with ACC, and we've realised that return. So we've got the 37.651 million in the bank earning 4%, whatever it is. So we've had increased, if you like, the gross value of that asset to 44 mil return, plus we've had the profit share. On the other side of the equation, ACC, our partner in this, you can see if you add the cash received, 18.73 mil to 30.7 mil. So in fact, their basket of money has increased to about 48 million. So they're quids in, and good on them, but that's a reflection of the market over that period of time and the returns and the sales that have taken place. So I don't think you can say, both parties went with their eyes open on certain premises. So I'm seeing, in 10 years' time that could equalise out to both parties have shared in the returns equally. I don't know if that helps you. It's a hard one to try and explain, but I'm not personally seeing any difficulty. Councillor Dick, can you help me out here?
Well, I had a question, but I mean, the fundamental situation at that time was that it had been recognised for a long time that the leasehold land portfolio provided very low rate to return, very secure, of course. And at the times, it says in the paper here, the return was around about 2% per annum. And so realising the 38 million enabled us to increase our return on that capital to 3.5% or 4% or whatever.
Perhaps I should make a comment. The other strategic issue, which is not so purely a financial issue, is that Napier leasehold land is a legacy asset, right? If you go back to its origin, it was post 1930, largely residential and commercial property developed by the old Harbour Board through the 30-year period from 30 to 60, and it was associated with the development of actually the city of Napier, which was at that time a strategic investment by the Harbour Board in terms of the community that surrounded it. But bring that forward to 50 odd years, from 60 to the sort of the decade we're in now, that strategic value had long gone. The only value of that asset on the council's balance sheet was yield, and the yield that was at that particular time running at 2%. I would remind every councillor around this table, but some of you haven't had to deal with it, that that's been a burning issue around the lessee-council relationship, particularly as Glasgow lease rental valuations moved rents from, Alan and Neil, you'd know, from X to X. So the 21-year right of renewal leases and rentals, but the problem is that they're fixed, the rental amount is fixed through a 21-year period, and then it does a huge bang upwards as you renew it. So it's a combination of a legacy asset. It's lost the strategic value. It was an issue, particularly for the Napier councillors, I remember, around, well, should the council be in this business or not in this business? All of that's at play. So you can't just deal with this particular issue in isolation.
Bailey.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking along the same lines, it seems, as Councillor Bevan and Councillor Barker. I'm getting a lot of comment from the public that, in their opinion, this deal smelt like a 10-day-old fish. And there's nothing in this paper that gives me the confidence to go back to the public and say this is a good deal or a bad deal. You indicate that you earned a net price of $37.65 million from ACC for the deal, but you've given no indication of what sort of interest has been earned on that money, so we can make some sort of comparison with a status quo sort of position. You've given us, I've been given no indication as to what the discount rate that is being used on this particular deal, so that we can calculate whether it's below zero, or is at zero, is below 1 or above 1, which indicates whether it's a good deal or a bad deal. How that sits currently, whether that needs revision, whether that particular number needs revising. I'm concerned about 0.5.3, which brought up by Councillor Bevan, because to me that reads you've automatically included a 1.5% increase in leasehold rates or leasehold figures each year for the next 50 years. Maybe I'm reading that wrong, but that's what it reads like to me, which to me is not a very particularly good deal for the leaseholders. So there's all that, it's a very good paper in terms of setting out what the deal is, but to me it doesn't tell me that it proves that it's been a good deal, and that's where I've got a real problem. And I think the explanations that have been given today, to me, don't satisfy that for me. So that's what I want to know. And then, at the end of the day, we have a whole bunch of financials come through where we're comparing budgets with actuals. At the time that the deal was done, the net present value calculations used. So what I want to see is a comparison of how that's actually worked out in actuality. What would the status quo position be if we hadn't have done this deal? Where would we be sitting now? That's all not included in here, unfortunately. So I think it's almost as if we need to go back to the drawing board again to come up with, to me, some more honest answers.
Mr. Chairman?
Just a comment before taking your question.
Well, actually,
just hang on, Councillor. Paul, I think you need to be careful. There have been answers given, and they are honest answers. You need more information. I think we just need to be careful about that language. The staff are giving honest answers. You just need some more of it. So just caution on the language we use. Councillor Dick.
Well, I was going to raise that matter, which is becoming a little bit habitual around this table, unfortunately. But you've dealt with it. But my question was, in terms of the profit share on freeholding, the one around about $1 million, where has that money gone? And likewise, the 322 profit share on freehold sold.
Yeah, over the years that's dropped into our operating account. I'll be right on that. Yeah, dropped into our operating account and is paid
Both
council costs. Yes.
Both of them. Yeah, okay. And the interest on the sale proceed, that fund's operating as well.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. That was my question as well that you've just answered. I'm quite concerned about that. So what we're doing is devaluing the 38 million in effect. What do we need to do to be making sure that any compounding interest is actually going back into the investment where it should have been held in the first instance?
I think we'll deal with that particular issue when we get to our workshop, particularly on the annual plan and the strategic plan. If you're dead right, if the council is heavily reliant on its dividend streams, including interest for its operating budget, and taking all of that cash from the money held on deposit for operating is essentially eroding the capital base. Now that's okay when you don't hold a lot of cash on hand in the bank, but there's a fair bit holding at the moment. So it's another part of the framework that says that, I'll be really clear about this, that if you want to restructure the way in which the balance sheet works the dividends are paid and the revenue streams that fund this organisation, that has to be part of the consideration. But I'd also remind everybody, then this goes back, several council terms, is that you have a fundamental strategic question to ask yourselves, inevitably, which is where is the capital best deployed from the balance sheet?
Are there any other issues you want to raise? I totally appreciate the questions being raised. It takes a long time to understand this issue. I've been struggling with it for 20 years, understanding both sides of the equation. Councillor Dick will back me up. It's been one of the issues that I've pursued with some vigour for 20 years. It does take a lot of energy to get around, and I just wondered, Paul, whether we can address some of those questions raised by Councillor Bailey and Bevan and Co. Just to have another crack at that, or even if we hold a small workshop to get a whiteboard going and just showing what that looks like. I wonder whether that's worthwhile. I totally appreciate Councillor Bailey's position. If it's been raised in the community and you're struggling to get an answer for it, then that's problematic from a councillor perspective. Is there any other forum we can generate to try and throw some more light on this?
I think, Mr. Chairman.
Could I just suggest the simple way for me for this is basically a two-column approach to it. We have what the income and the benefits are of this to the regional council. You start off with 38 million and the 4%, etc., and go through what they are, and we can see on that over the lifetime of this. And then on the other side is what are the inputs and the outputs, and therefore the net to the ACC, over the period of a lifetime. So you can see it. So at the end it boils down to this is about cash. Net present value and all these other fancy terms, are all very well, but in the end it comes down to money transferring between bank accounts, cash. So we need to know what is the net cash flow into this council, net cash flow into ACC over a period of time. And that'll explain it exactly. Forget the smoke and mirrors, follow the money.
Why don't those councillors who still want further information, further honest information, deal with Paul or whoever offline?
How do you do that?
I don't need any more information.
I'm happy with that.
Is there, you're interested to perhaps have a session with Paul and the staff to keep walking it through, a couple of hours, thrash it out and really get your heads around it? Is that something we can do? It is important to get some go forward on it. Bringing it to a conclusion, then we've got a recommendation to what with this paper? Receive the paper and for a further discussion to take place between interested councillors and the Chief Financial Officer. Is that okay?
Is that the addition to the recommendation you're moving?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
I'm happy to second that.
So you're comfortable with that, Paul?
Yep.
Yeah. That's moved. Is there any discussion on that from anyone? Move that. Do we have acceptance of that resolution? All those in favour of that? When do you think you'd do that, Paul? Wild enthusiasm, yes.
Yeah, wild enthusiasm. The priority for staff at the moment is, of course, the 23rd of February strategic and annual plan workshop, and we're all working hard to that. After that workshop, it'll depend how that goes, how much extra work there is in order to deliver the annual plan, which is obviously top priority over the next 3 to 4 weeks. So this is a few weeks away, but we will work. I've got the list of things you want. We'll get some assistance in doing that as well, I think.
Are you comfortable with that, councillors? It's not going to happen this week or next. I would say, though, and adding to it, that we can't overturn the deal anyway. So,
Could I have an entirely different conversation?
Councillor.
Could I also suggest if they go back through previous council papers, consultation documents, etc., it's all there.
appreciate that, councillor, but, you know... Oh, okay. Yes, can you help us out?
Microphone. Sorry. We only have 246 sections left, and 157 of them are single site. And the way the trend's going, those will sell more. So it's fantastic for the lessees because, you know, they may as well own it rather than us. So it's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the issues will get smaller and smaller and smaller with the lessees.
With respect, that has nothing to do with this deal.
Oh, no, but I'm just giving you the
With
whole
respect,
picture.
it's everything to
Yes.
do with individual decisions
Yes.
The whole picture, that was
Yes,
all.
that's great. Thank you for that. We've resolved that, so
So
we'll...
Trudy, it'll be a blessing for you because you won't have to deal with
Thank you.
leases.
Let's move on
Thank
to...
councillors should thank the lucky stars.
We'll go